Okay, so my name is Matt Bradley-Tschirgi. I can spell it in the email or something. It's not difficult to spell. I'm 34 years old. I lived in Portland, Oregon. I've been here about 10 years, but I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia. And as far as the games industry, I guess, I graduated in 2005 with a bachelor's in game design and interactivity. And I released an indie game called Frankenstein's Bastard Daughter a few years ago through the Game Salad platform. And I've been doing some writing online for gaming websites for about almost 15 years, I guess. I started with a website, doing stuff for a website called Armchair Arcade, and then more lately, I got a PC Gamer bought a piece, and then I got something just came out I wrote something for Games Radar, and I did some stuff for Laser Time and Battleship Pretension recently as well.
So yeah, I'm gonna zip back a little bit, and we won't talk entirely about this, but I wanted to talk about sort of from your first note, you're talking about you're going to school and studying game design. So
Yep.
Can you just talk a little bit about what were you sort of hoping going to Savannah College of Art and Design, and sort of
Sure,
what were you
yeah.
imagining that would be a path to?
I went to 3 colleges in 5 years to get a bachelor's, so I kept on. I originally was studying film, and at SCAD, Savannah College Art Design, I was studying film. And I just would go around, downtown Savannah and see a lot of art school graduates working at the gas station or working at the ice cream store. And a few new majors popped up, and one of them happened to be this game design and interactivity. And I liked, video games as a kid, playing them, but also read a lot of the magazines like Nintendo Power, PC Gamer, EGM, Computer Gaming World, and I just thought it would be fun. Like, I didn't even quite know what game design really meant in the context of a college degree. We were the first people, I was part of the first group of people through that program. And the curriculum was pretty vague at the time.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
Oh, go on.
No, please. I'm here to listen to you.
Sure.
You go ahead.
Specifically, I was more interested in the dialogue and the plot and the stories of games. And that was something that wasn't really covered. In fact, although in the intro course we did do a group project that was an RPG, typically when you got to the level design courses, it was all first-person shooter focused. With the Unreal Tournament, was it 2003 or something? It's whatever version came around that time, was the editor that we used. And I like the writing, sort of side and the creativity of it, but I'm really bad at drawing, and I went to an art school. So, I sort of thought I would go from there to work at a video game company, and out of college I applied to a lot of places, but, didn't do an internship like I probably should have, and just never really got a chance to get my foot in the door through online applications.
I mean, was there something? I've gone to college, so I understand sort of the fuzzy, I kind of want to study this. I think I like this. Maybe someday
Sure.
I'll do this. And I know that you went off in a couple other directions, but was there something specific or even broadly that you were hoping or dreaming for? I'm not asking you to say that you wanted to be the next, blank or whatever, but did you have a picture of where you hoped you would have landed in the game industry?
One of the companies that went to speak at the school was LucasArts, and this was right before they went to, some of those guys left and formed Telltale Games.
Right.
But I grew up liking the adventure games, and I thought, writing or doing puzzle design or that sort of thing would have been interesting, or Double Fine later, those sort of things. It was an interesting time because, by the time I graduated 2005, YouTube had just started.
That's
social
right.
And it's hard to believe that was only, just 11 years ago, I guess, but
Well, we
social
graduated.
media.
We graduated the same year.
Okay.
I'm a year younger than you, but
Uh-huh.
I have the same expanse of like, the memory of like after graduating, like trying to just make sense of like what the hell am I supposed to do? Like at the same time when like the internet is just drastically changing everything. So
That's right. I mean, you had
yeah.
YouTube. There wasn't, like Kickstarter or Patreon or Indiegogo, and that you could tell something new was going to happen, but it wasn't quite there yet. It was this weird transition period.
So you mentioned that LucasArts, they came and
Yep.
talked at your school. So I don't know how old or like what the first games program was at school, but I know that 11 years ago it was still relatively. Like I think I remember like a couple years after I graduated college, I wrote a piece for EGM about like the rise of games academia, and just at that time you could write an article about every program because
Sure.
there weren't that many. But so I mean I want to ask you about that, but I'm also curious, like so LucasArts coming out, obviously it sounds like people from the industry were reaching out and they wanted to help encourage it be an ecosystem where people can come and enter. But what did LucasArts come and talk about at your school?
Yeah. Okay, this has been a while. I'm just trying to think of it. So I don't remember specifically the names of the people that
Sure.
went, but they showed sort of a highlight reel of games that were coming out. One of which was already canceled. It was the Full Throttle sequel.
Oh wow!
That was sort of an action game. I don't know if have you played the LucasArts stuff or.
I have, yes. I mean, I've interviewed people who were involved with the decision to cancel that game, but I've never.
That one I think was more sort of action oriented, or at least from the clips they showed. Because at the time I was on the message board adventuregamers.com, and they had a lot of news about this. I thought it was weird they'd show a highlight reel of a game that was already canceled, but they showed that. I think the Sam and Max game they were working on that got canceled at the time.
Yeah.
And I forget what else. Yeah.
Sounds like it was a grim talk that they came and gave.
Sort of. I mean, they were saying how good life balance was with between work and not having crazy 80-hour weeks all the time at LucasArts, and they do a good work-life balance.
Yeah.
Is mainly what they focused on, and then at the end they gave out video games for free, which I thought was sort of tacky.
Did they give out LucasArts games or other?
They did, yeah.
Okay.
LucasArts games. There was what was it? Rogue Squadron 3 Rebel Strike or whatever.
Yeah.
For GameCube. Yeah. That one's not so great. They gave out that one, and something else. It was sort of a random selection. I don't.
Did they give out that Heaven Hell simulator management game that they made?
That was quite a bit ago. That was more in the 90s, but I remember that one. It was like a SimCity 2000 Heaven Hell.
Right.
It's called Afterlife, I think.
Yes, that's right.
Uh-huh. But they talked about. I don't know how LucasArts was a fun place to work at. I don't think they were hiring specifically, as far as I know, and certainly around that time, LucasArts had a lot of different, upper level executive management in charge that kept on changing how much they made in house versus how much they farmed out. And this was before the Lego games, I think. But
so this was, but did you feel like the stuff that they were telling you about as far as like life-work balance, like I feel like that's so pervasive these days that we hear and read a lot about just, how out of whack work-life balance is at game companies. I mean,
when I heard that, even though someone with no experience, especially as a student at that time in the professional world working, that I was very skeptical of that claim.
Really?
Yeah, because around that time, oh man, this is years ago. Sorry.
That's okay.
There is some blog or something by something named EA Spouse, I think.
Yeah, the live journal post. Yeah.
Right. Whereas this, it got blogged on the Kotaku and GameSpot and whatever sites were around at the time, and seeing that I thought was quite interesting, and so I was aware of that people worked a lot, and also that people could work for years in a game and have it not ship, and I mean, I knew it was hard work, so I seemed a little bit skeptical of the dog and pony show they were giving. At the same time, I'm pretty sure one of the people there was one of the designers of like Curse of Monkey Island or something. So there are people that had been involved with games I had admired. But they weren't giving a speech on the history of the company. It was sort of more of a pitch to work at LucasArts and here's some of our new stuff. But it was pretty surface level material.
Interesting. Oftentimes that's what a lot of these kind of industry interfacing things, like a lot of talks that are given at Game Developers Conference. Like I often feel like it's less, about sort of the thinking or the philosophy of how they make their games, and it's more about framing things in terms of like, come work for us because we're awesome.
Yeah.
So that doesn't surprise me, but so I mean, yeah, being among the first class of graduates from a game design program. I mean, so this was an art school, but at that time, like,
that's right.
What were they really proud of at that time? Like, how were they sort of advertising themselves in this program, and what were they bragging about? And what do you remember people always talking about as the pride of the program? Yeah.
So because it was an art school, no matter what your major was, whether it was, I mean, they had like a major, I think, called sequential art that was like comic books, or they had industrial design or architecture. They had all sorts of different programs. Yeah. But regardless, you had to take 5 drawing classes and 5 art history classes. And by drawing, I mean hand drawing, not a computer.
Not a stylus tablet.
Yeah, not a stylus or 3D Studio Max or something. And so they gave you a foundational sort of history in the arts, but the main thing I sort of came away with is, especially in the level design class, is the professors didn't necessarily know what they were doing. in that, in level design, they were teaching us Unreal Tournament 2003, and the teacher didn't know that much, and he's like, oh, just look through the help documentation. And it was, you could very much tell we were the first people through this program, and it was sort of a hodgepodge of classes, and if you picked enough of them and passed, you got a degree. And that being said, they should have failed me out of my computer graphics course, because I'm terrible at artwork, and 3D artwork I'm really bad at. Yeah. And they managed to barely make me have like a D or something, and I squeezed by. But it was such a random collection of courses. Like by the end, it was sort of like, I'm glad I finished it. But as you said, I felt sort of lost. It was like, well, what the hell do I do with this?
Right. Well, you mentioned too that there were a lot of graduates working in the program, and you said that most of the other graduates, just quoting from your email, you said that they were working in coffee shops and gas stations and lawn.
That's what it sort of seemed like. I mean, I recall some people got jobs right out of college, but a lot of them, as far as I know, did not, or the ones that did, they did a really good internship. I mean, what I did in my last summer before my senior year is I taught game design at a computer camp for kids.
Right.
Called Imagination Computer Camps. And as far as career-wise, I don't think, in retrospect, that might not have been the best move, but it certainly is the, what is it? I do a podcast on this 90s cartoon, The Critic, that had John Lovitz on it.
Oh yeah, I know. I did my research. I did my research.
Okay. Well, thanks. Oh, very good. And
I'm excited.
And there's a joke in there, and it's about a film school, but it says lights, camera, unemployment. And I kind of think that same thing with art. I mean, the art school I went to, SCAD, is a private school and very expensive, and it's the job placement at that time when I went there was not a huge focus on the program.
I mean, do you feel that whether it's this program or programs in general that teach that discipline, do you feel like do they do a better job now than what? I mean, it feels like reading your stuff. Like I feel like you didn't quite say so, but it seemed like you were part of an experiment.
Yeah, I did feel like I was part of an experiment, and I have not really looked at modern curriculums. I hope it would be better. I almost think in some of these, I mean, we also had, we had a guy that came to spoke to us at school from Acclaim that was saying like, oh, you don't need a degree to work in the industry, and I sort of still think that's still true. Like, you might be better off just, moving to San Francisco or LA or Austin or someplace like that and getting your foot in the door doing beta testing as opposed to a degree. I'm not sure how important a degree is to get your foot in the door for the game industry in retrospect.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned you applied for a lot of entry-level jobs, and
sure.
You didn't get a response. I mean, did you get at least like rejection notices or personal notices? Did you reach out to any of your professors and sort of circle back and get their thoughts about why this was happening?
I never reached back to the professors, really. I did. I got a rejection notice from maybe 2 places, but this is maybe out of like 100 or so I applied to. So it was very.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people want to get in the games industry. So, and even when you apply for so-called regular jobs, you don't always hear something back when you apply to it. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing people say, right? Is that it's a passion industry, and I mean, do you feel like there's something dishonest, or they're not saying like what the full picture is as far as like what it takes to get in? Because it's obviously more than passion, right?
It is. It's not just passion. It's skill. But I think in retrospect, I should have done an internship or something. But I think like knowing people or meeting people, or going to the Games Developers Conference, GDC, things like that are important. I mean, yes, the raw skills are important, but a lot of especially with YouTube and tutorial videos everywhere, a lot of people can teach themselves something. Yeah. Nowadays, like just the skills you need to have, contacts are also important. So I think it is a bit disingenuous. And on the other hand, I've been thinking about this.
Yeah.
A college degree, at the end of the day, you're getting a piece of paper. And what you do to it is up to you. You're not being promised a job. You're not being promised. It's supposed to help you get a job, but, a lot of people don't, and I'm an example of this, a lot of people don't do what they went to college for.
I think that's most people, honestly.
Yeah.
Unless you're like going to be like a doctor or a surgeon or an astronaut, like that many years of school, like it's unusual if it does happen, yeah.
Right.
So I mean, not to be blunt or insensitive, but I mean, we even in all these years since, and I'm sure this was the case then, because there are things like school programs popping up about it, and if they're talking about how the game industry is booming and everyone's bragging about how well it's doing, I mean, do you blame yourself for like why you weren't given like even a chance to get in? Do you really think it's all on you?
I don't think it's all on me. I think some of it is on me, but I think so many people want to. I mean, it's like the film industry, I imagine, and that it's something so many people want to get into. It's so competitive that I think had I realized that more going in, I might have chosen something different to study. I met a lot of nice people at school. I learned some interesting things. And I'm working in tech support now, so I mean, I like computers, and that I get to work with them as my day job is cool.
Yeah.
But it's the I don't know. You gotta pay the bills.
That's absolutely true. I mean, do you feel like you learn things from the art school mentality that you feel like a lot of people who make games do you feel like you know things or understand things that they don't understand?
I will say, especially, even though I didn't like the art history classes at the time, in retrospect, learning to like analyze a painting, or even in the case of a video game, looking at how a cutscene is laid out or how graphics are on the screen, everything comes from somewhere. It's pretty rare to find an idea that's completely new, and trying to look at something and looking at artistic influences, I think, and having games that have a specific a yet consistent art style is something I'll tend to notice, or like I'll be very nitpicky when I played a few years ago. I think it was Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, and that's the one with Kevin Spacey was in it.
Oh yeah.
And there's an opening cutscene where Kevin Spacey, I think your friend dies. I don't quite. It's been a while, but like someone is dead and it's a funeral service, and Kevin Spacey's character walks over and puts his hand on the coffin, and his hand falls through the coffin. And part of me thinks like this is a multi-million-dollar game and one of the most mainstream franchises around. And that's something I notice because in art school they teach you to look at that stuff so carefully, but I'm not sure if other people notice or necessarily care about those things.
Mm-hmm. It's weird. Most people talk about what happens immediately after that. I think you're the first person who's brought up, because that's the press X to pay respects, right?
Yes, it is. It's right before that.
Well, I mean, so I didn't go to art school. I studied the music industry and music business. So I got more of a like business and a little bit of a cultural education. I mean, I think this is something that I still don't have a sense of like how well game design programs do. Like I spoke to someone earlier, not for an interview, just sort of we had a call talking about like they teach in some game programs how they teach people to be conscientious designers. Is this a term that you've heard before?
I have not.
Okay. Well, I guess it is like talking about like, you know, things like the culture of video games and sort of things that touch on the history that go beyond video games as products. I mean, did your education do that as well, or was it much more theory and art appreciation?
There was, let me look at my computer for a second. I have
Sure.
a copy of my transcript, so that might be useful. Let me see.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to dwell the entire time talking about it, but it's interesting to track sort of, what these programs
I can't
were
find
like.
what I'm looking for, but yeah, off the top of my head, some was theory, but the hands-on stuff was very, because it was, design and interactivity, right?
Yeah.
Some stuff, there was a class on Macromedia Director, there was a class, which was out of date at the time, there was a class on Macromedia Flash, there was a class on Dreamweaver.
Wow, that is a long time ago.
Yeah, and some of in the final, I think you had 1 or 2 semesters of like a group game design thing where you and a team had different things you were supposed to do on it, and I think I had the title of associate producer for whatever reason, and I wrote the blog for the development and filmed videos of people talking about why they did the graphics like this and so forth. And they sort of let you kind of do your own thing. It was pretty open-ended, but there was a history class that was not focused. They kind of lumped in like video games with cartoons, like it was sort of, I guess they called it new media history or something.
Yeah.
But at the time it was not. The theory was low in the totem pole. It was more getting your hands on with a wide variety of different applications. Of course, you had an intro course where you did the Adobe Suite, Photoshop, Illustrator.
Yeah. That's weird. What do you mean they lumped it in? Like they were talking about like animation techniques or composition or what?
It was
cartoons
even
and
lazier
video
than that.
games?
It was like, we're going to watch a documentary off the Roger Rabbit DVD, and next week we're going to watch a documentary off the Bugs Bunny What's Opera doc cartoon.
What?
Yeah.
Why? I mean,
I don't know. It was like they had to find some theory thing for this new program.
yeah.
And it was very in its early stages.
Okay. I mean, at the time, did you feel like you were getting like a good lay of the land and sort of what the industry is like and the theory?
No, not really.
No? Okay.
We had a few teachers that had industry experience, but I guess this is true of a lot of professors, right? Or that you go to school, you get a doctorate or you get a master's, and you immediately become a professor.
Right.
And there's some of that too. So.
But these people who were teaching you, like they were in the industry, or they weren't, or they were.
Some were and some weren't. It was maybe half and half.
weird.
Yeah.
I mean, and the people who had been in the industry, I mean, were they able to tell you about, like, what the industry is like right now, or were they, like, still grounded in, like, back in their day, maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, something like that?
It was more back in their day. They didn't. I mean, they mentioned that it was really competitive. One thing I do remember is we had a person that said, when these game companies look at your demo reels, they get a few other people in an office with a few pitchers of coffee, and just sit and watch 200 of these things in one day, and they reject most of them. So that's one thing I remember that a professor said that was specifically related to the industry. But a lot of it was more focused on, work in your individual projects or work in your group projects.
Interesting.
It was very little focus at the time on business.
Interesting. Did other people that you met, other students, friends that you made, I mean, did they feel like they were getting a good lay of the land? Have any of them gone on to work in the industry themselves?
I know some of them have. I haven't really kept in contact with some of them. There's a friend that had worked at Midway at an internship and then ended up getting hired out of school there.
Oh, okay.
Someone got hired to do some computer graphics work for some branch of the military.
Okay.
And the project they worked on was this bizarre environment that sort of looked like a cel-shaded version of Disney's Fantasia.
Okay.
Those are a few that I remember. But from the people I knew, it seemed, and some of them might have tried to form indie game companies or something, because you did have some teachers talk about getting grants from Georgia to have people start small businesses in the state. Mm-hmm. But I cannot remember a huge amount that right out of college got something in the industry.
So I mean, you went from there, and you said that you also you taught at a computer camp.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, how did you take sort of the experiences from, the college experience and sort of correct for that and sort of supplement that and sort of try to step into the role of being, the teacher you didn't have, or to make sure that you, taught people things the way that you wanted to be taught? Like, how did you sort of take that and implement that into a battle plan to teach, other students yourself?
Right. So the company I did work for was Imagination Computer Camps.
Yeah.
And I did some work at the time they had some stuff at Georgia Tech, and then some was at Bentley College, I think, in Waltham, Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And we had built middle school and high school kids in the same classroom. And some were using, I think I did a class with QBasic. One was with this European software called Game Maker, mm-hmm. to do basic side-scrolling stuff. I think that's still around. And then a very basic RPG maker that I'll have to think of the name of. I can't think of it right now. But, based on my college experience, and what I tried to gradually introduce new concepts on the blackboard and have kids form groups. I mean, I guess that part was the same, but I would also check in periodically, see how people were doing, or kind of give them more ideas of things to work on. Mm-hmm. If they didn't understand a concept, I'd show them how to do it, but I would focus less on the lecture and more on the students having time to work on their projects. And really, I think the length of the class at the computer camp might have been like an hour or a little bit more, and the classes I took at SCAD, almost every time were like 2 hours. Like, they were quite long, like 2 hours or 2.5 hours. Mm-hmm. But even having like an hour, it seemed like plenty of time to have kids work in their project and have something they could come and take home as a sort of finished project in a lot of cases, because they were working on the computers we had desktop set up. They didn't bring in their laptops and plug them in. So you're encouraging kids of different ages to work together in groups. You're sort of giving them the foundation, and then sort of letting them be free and checking in on them. I do think, however, a side effect of the way I taught the classes is a lot of people made very similar looking games.
How do you mean?
With Game Maker in particular, I figured out how to, do a Mario kind of clone and showed people that. And then pretty much after I showed them that, all the games the kids made were Mario clones. Out of the whole summer, one kid said, I'd rather do an airplane game. And we figured out how to make sort of like a 1942 kind of shoot 'em up overhead shmup thing.
Yeah.
But I think because I gave the one example of a game, everyone thought like, oh, that's the only thing I can make with this program.
Interesting.
Yeah.